I'm Igor Volsky.
I'm Michelle Jawando.
And this is Thinking Cap,
a podcast from the Center for American Progress.
Michelle, today we're talking to Markos Moulitsas, founder of Daily Kos, and John Burton, the political director of Daily Action. We sat down with both of them to hear concrete ways we can all get activated in the political movement, to participate in all of the actions going on around the country, and to make sure that people who want to get involved can enter this political space in new and creative ways.
But this is not new for Markos.
Oh,
You've
no.
known him for quite some time.
Yeah, Markos is actually one of the voices as I was coming of age politically and just as a human during the Bush years.
Growing.
Growing. He kicked off what at the time was really revolutionary, the birth of the political blog.
Right.
Providing a platform for people who weren't traditionally involved in politics, who didn't have political jobs, and giving them the opportunity to opine on what, at the time, of course, President Bush was doing. And so I began my career in politics as a blogger at Think Progress, and Markos and his work, and really his vision of providing a channel for progressives who we're in such darkness during the Bush years. We forget now.
I think we forget how difficult there were marches and protests, and you just felt the both burden and the anguish. We were still all dealing with the trauma of 9/11, but the reaction from this administration was outsized in terms of their response. And so that tension constantly kind of emerged in the early 2000s.
And you felt so isolated because you didn't yet have political blogs in the beginning of that administration. You certainly didn't have social media. And you remember the political forces told you that if you criticize this president, if you criticize this policy, that you were somehow
being patriotic.
You were inherently being anti-American. And so for Markos to lead this movement, to start this blog, and to say
as a veteran.
And he talked about how being a veteran really gave him this credibility of saying, you know what, I served for my country, and I'm going to speak out in a democracy like we all can as citizens.
And John Burton, as we think about how people actually communicate, I tend to text almost exclusively.
Yeah, you blow up my phone all the time, so I know about that. Yeah, slow it down, Michelle.
So when you think about, are we using all of our digital tools? Are we using the way that people communicate? And how can you bring that into activism and resistance work? It is just a prolific, but a simple, easy, common sense way to get involved. And so that was a really exciting interview for me.
Yeah, but first, let's hear from the man who really started it all, Markos Moulitsas, founder of Daily Kos.
So, Markos, we so appreciate you joining us here today on Thinking Cap. But before we get started, I actually, I know your blog, obviously, but I don't know a lot about you. And I know that for our listeners, we're trying to expose them and teach them about the resistance. But I often think that how people get into this work sometimes is actually the fuel that people need to hear. Like, why did you get involved? How did you start to formulate Kos? And why are you still doing this work?
So I started Daily Kos 15 years ago. We're turning 15 years old, and at that time in 2002...
Congratulations.
I know, that's a big deal.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a scary big number. At the time, I was working as a project manager at a web development shop. I am an Army veteran. I served as an artilleryman. I was in Germany. I served during the first Gulf War. This is the beginning of the blogging era.
Right.
I started my dinky little blog, and like I like to say is that Daily Kos took off because there was a market need for strong, unapologetic liberal voices. And it's sad that I was apparently one of the few out there, but it did provide that first sort of impetus, and did so on a topic that I had particular credibility talking about, which was military matters and the run-up to the war, and doing so in a way that made it difficult for the right to say that I was un-American, because unlike the vast majority of them, I actually served my nation in uniform. I wore combat boots. And I had that moral standing to criticize the war efforts.
So when you started in 2002 in your boring San Francisco job, did you have political experience? Had you written about politics before, or did you just kind of jump in with both feet and were like, we'll see how this goes?
I actually had some weird experience. When I was in law school at Boston University, I actually had a blog before blogs existed. It was called the Hispanic Latino News Service, and every day I would gather and collate information relevant to the Latino community, and I would hand code the HTML. This is before there was any content management services. I would actually, it was a laborious process. I spent 3 hours putting this thing together, and then I would have to take the previous day's updates and hard code that into an archive. So I did this for almost pretty much the 3 years I was in the Army. So I was already into writing, and I've always been into politics. I mean, there's a picture of me when I must have been 4 years old with a newspaper in my hands, and it was upside down, so I was actually reading it, but I was ready to. I was like, can't wait to read this thing in my hands. And I even remember back in when I was in high school, I used to, in Chicago, I had my parents get me a subscription to both the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times. I had no idea until later how expensive those subscriptions were. I assumed it was cheap, but it wasn't. So my parents always, even though they didn't have a lot of money, they indulged in that desire of mine to really know as much as possible. I would go to the library because they would have newspapers from all over the country. You know, they had the big rack, right? So I read the Denver Post and the St. Louis Dispatch, and I would read newspapers from all over the country to see what was going on. And I can't imagine what my childhood would have been had the internet existed.
Yeah.
Because I was made for the internet.
So can we ask a question about sustenance and how you sustain the resistance? Because I think it is pretty impressive. I didn't realize that you've been around for 15 years, but I think for so many people coming up in the progressive movement, we've just kind of always had you there, almost like that nice warm throw blanket on the couch in the living room.
Well, I mean, what sustains me is my community. I mean, it's tens of thousands of people, and they help fund and they do actions, and they engage and they give me that sustenance. And as I've been doing a lot of mentoring of a lot of the new resistance groups. I mean, I call them all kids, even though some of them are older. But politically, they're all kids. They've stumbled onto something thanks to Trump, into something that they don't quite understand, and these huge communities that are being built around their work. At the time, when Daily Kos started in 2002, the model really was the pundit model. And Daily Kos, by accident, by maybe my personality, became this community site, this massive community. And that was the new model. But not a lot of other organizations did it. And even the move-ons that had massive email lists and whatnot, they were really top to bottom. I mean, they decided what action they were going to do, and they would go out. And they would poll their members, but polling their members is still a top-bottom decision.
Well, Markos, soon a much larger audience is going to get your advice on how best to resist when your new book, The Resistance Handbook, 45 Ways to Fight Trump, is published. It's 45 ways to stop the 45th president. Tell us about the book and some of the best ways, some of the, I guess, highlights of those 45 that people can implement in their daily lives starting today.
Yeah, I literally just turned in the line edit to the book. So
good.
I just read it again, and I actually I'm very proud. I co-authored it with Michael Huttner, who's the founder of Progress Now. I did most of the writing. He did a lot of the organization and pulling in the ideas, resources for the book. And one of the funny things is I was doing the edits. It's really not 45 ways to fight Trump. I mean, because it's 45 themes. So if you look at there's a chapter on Be the Media, and Be the Media could be from sharing on Facebook more and integrating your political with your personal life more tightly. It could be tweeting. It could be fighting fake news. It could be supporting sites like Daily Kos and Raw Story. It's not even 45 ways, it's 45 themes. And there's a lot we can do. And I'm actually kind of proud of that, because I keep getting people come up to me and say, I made phone calls and I wrote this person and then I marched in the protest. Now what can I do? And there actually is a lot we can do, but perhaps the one that I am most proud of, like the number one thing you can do, and this is counterintuitive, but the number one thing you can do is take some time off.
Self-care?
Is you cannot burn out. We cannot have anybody burn out because this isn't a fight just about Trump. This is a fight to the end of our lives. So we can never give up. And one of the things I worry about is people are motivated to do stuff. That's the easiest thing to do is get people motivated to do stuff. I don't see people motivated to take some time off because you know what? Trump will say something stupid today. He'll say something stupid tomorrow. Don't worry. Take a week off. You'll come back. You can catch up, and he'll still be saying stupid things. So
that is the consistent theme here.
It really, really is. So to me, there's a lot of things to do. Recharge, rejuvenate, and I think it's important to really reconnect with what's important in your life. It's a lot easier to find energy to fight if you take care of yourself, you practice self-care, and you're not burnt out. And two, if you reconnect with the things that motivate you, whether it's a hike in the woods and appreciation for our nature, or whether it's spending time with your kids or nephews or your friends. If you connect with that consistently, you will be more motivated to put in the hard work that you need to put in to be a good activist. So that would be my number one suggestion to everybody who's in resistance is to take time off. It's okay. The resistance isn't going anywhere. We'll be right here when you get back.
I love it. Markos, and that's an absolutely wonderful way to end. A little bit of self-care, people, from one of the people who started it all, Markos, founder and publisher of Daily Kos. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was great.
Oh, yeah, pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you, Markos.
Thanks.
From the grandfather of digital advocacy to a voice and a leader who's using a familiar tool to reach and activate people in this era of Trump. So, Michele, I am very excited about our next guest, John Burton, who's the political director of Daily Action, because, as you know, after the election, the work of our center, the Center for American Progress, really changed dramatically. And one of the things we started doing, which we weren't really doing before, was designing direct-to-user toolkits for all of the people who were energized by the election to use to channel their outrage about Trump, about whatever Trump was doing. And we've had no better partner in that effort than Daily Action and John Burton, who I also learned through working with him is a former colleague of ours here at CAP, and then went on to work for Barack Obama's presidential campaign, was one of the first 20 employees of Barack Obama's campaign in 2007 and 2008. John, welcome to Thinking Cap.
Thanks. It's great to be here on, I guess this will be the third episode of Thinking Cap.
Fourth episode.
Yes.
Fourth, that's right.
And
fourth
we've had a
episode.
bonus episode.
Bonus episode.
Really?
So you're
It's
just
a lot
here.
of fun.
You're
So
just here.
I'm just here. And it's also great to be back in D.C., back at CAP. The same exciting spirit of action around progressive values is still here. And I'm obviously a big fan of you guys and the work that you're doing here at the center.
Well, we're super excited to have you. But I don't know if all of our listeners know what Daily Action is. So can you kind of break that down for us?
Awesome. Happy to do that. So Daily Action is an app that you sign up on just using your phone, and it's all through text. And so the way that you sign up for Daily Action is to text the word daily, DAILY, to the number for action.
Now, we know some people need help with spelling, so we appreciate that, John. Okay.
I just like to, but you're going to text that word that you know how to spell to the number for action, which is 228466. And then you'll get a prompt for your zip code. And then after that, what you'll get Monday through Friday is a text message that explains an issue that is current, oftentimes taken out of the news that has broken that morning or the night before, and you just press the link and you hear a recording, and then you're automatically connected to your senator or your governor or your member in the House of Representatives. What our goal is to basically give you a tool for your activism or a tool for creating a relationship with people who are supposed to be working for you every day, every week, every year. And what we found is, so we've got about 270,000 people signed up. We've got
By the way,
Facebook.
let's not gloss over that. That's a lot of people
That's a lot of
for an organization that started when?
So we started in December. November, the November election hit a lot of us pretty hard.
Yeah.
And this came out of just a responsive, I guess it was like therapy. It's like, how do you recover emotionally? And some of us like to keep busy, and that's how we distract ourselves. And
I was home watching reruns of bad TV and in
As
my
you do.
pajamas. That's what I was doing. So I am so impressed.
yeah, well, okay, so there's this, and then I was also like, oh, maybe I should learn Russian. Like, maybe I should hide.
I'll give you
near the
lessons,
bed.
John.
You know, so, but there's an op-ed in the New York Times that drew on some academic research and just some anecdotal research, and it was headlined like, "Don't write, call your representative." And it made the case for phone calls as a really effective mode of activism. Our idea was, why don't we just make it very easy for people to make these calls? And so we started in December because Trump's transition team, while I guess doing whatever they were doing with the Russians, they were also starting to put out names of cabinet picks. And I mean, most of them got through, but these are like genuinely ill-suited individuals for that. In some cases, like I think our very first call was on Rick Perry, and it's like, the dude just ran for president and said he wants to shut this department down. Maybe it was a typo, maybe it was a mistake, but call your senator. This person should not be the secretary of energy. But then also, what's really exciting is just a hunger for information, like this sort of civics 101 moment where we're all, if we had a sense of what the CBO was before, and most of us didn't, we're like all following the CBO score now. Like people
The
have
CBO score on healthcare.
exactly.
Congressional Budget
There's
Office.
like there's a lot of shorthand. It's like a sense of what's the difference between the House and the Senate. Like how does a law come into creation? People realizing, in a sense, in a really positive sense, that even though the healthcare bill made it through the House, that doesn't mean we've lost. It still has to get through the Senate. And if it's even a little different, it has to go back to the House. And so there's been this awakening, but I think there's a lot of energy that's being used effectively and constructively and productively.
How did you take me back to when you decided after reading the New York Times article, okay, calls are the most important thing, but how did you make the leap of saying, you know what, I'm going to make sure that as many people call as possible? And how did you decide on text message?
I'd sort of worked in tech for
Yeah.
a bit. This technology, it's really simple and it was available, and we were able to get it with some great partners here in DC. But the best thing about text is it's really non-intrusive. If you got it like a really nice app that maybe has more bells and whistles, you download it and your screen is cluttered and then you delete it. We're called Daily Action. Everybody is busy. We've got some hardcore people who make the call every single day. A lot of people, they make a call once a week or every other week, but they at least look at the action every day.
they know what's going
So
on
they know what's
anyway.
going
Yeah.
on. And part of what we've taken on as our charge is to make action easy, but then also to keep people informed of what's going on. One of our biggest actions that was one of our first real successes, we called Customs and Border Patrol. So they've got an office in every airport, and that's like the line for like DHL, FedEx, people who have packages that need to be delivered. And we called them right after that weekend where the executive order on the travel ban was dropped. And our goal was just to jam their phone lines and to say, we want information on who's being detained. We want a clear statement that you're going to comply with a judicial order, regardless of whether it came from Boston or Richmond or Seattle. And by the end of the day, they'd put out a press release agreeing to these things. But that was only a few months ago. But that also sounds like a foreign, like, not even a foreign country, just like a weird planet. It's like this is really the United States of America? But we had like a little over 20,000 people who were making the call that day. And you got comments, they're like, oh, if you call Louis Armstrong Airport in New Orleans, they pretend to be the voicemail. like there's a person who's answering the phone pretending to be the voicemail. There were other comments and where people were saying they're mad because now they're going to have to work overtime and pay overtime. And we're like, it's working. Keep doing it.
Keep
like
doing it.
the person who's answering the call, I mean, they're not the opponent, but our job today is to like break the system and prevent these wheels from turning. So Donald Trump is the reason why so many people are active and so many people are still active today. It's because of the things that he does that are just so provocative and scary and require immediate action. And people are realizing, or they're sort of coming out from under the bed and they're like, I've woken up. This is not a nightmare. I have to do something. And it's like, he is going to try his hardest to do every single thing he said he was going to do. If you don't like that, then go to town halls, make phone calls, inform your friends, start thinking about how to like convert people you know who voted for him. And we've got to do this. Otherwise, he'll be successful.
So, John, I always love to find out why people do this work, but I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah. So I was born in Miami. My family are immigrants, mostly from the Caribbean.
Oh, what part?
Jamaica.
Jamaica
and
and
Panama.
Bermuda.
Yeah.
In the
See,
house.
I had the feeling, but I was like,
There
I'll
you go.
find
I
out
know,
after
you
the
don't always
podcast.
wanna
Yeah,
be
but
that
it's like,
person, but
yeah.
yes.
So I mean, it's
I knew. See,
the
good people.
good people, and just so it's like everything that all of the values that I grew up with, the experience that I had in Miami, it's just very opposite to Trump's vision of like who's in, who's out, what's good, what's bad. The way that he describes immigrants, the way he describes immigration, the way he describes things like public schools, like the public schools that I went to and my sisters went to, it's absurd, and it's an attack. And it's an attack on our communities, but it's also an attack on the America that's already great, that we're part of creating every single day. So for me, I already know why America's great. I know the difference in experiences, the difference in opportunities that are here. And we can say, so that's education, or that's healthcare, or that's immigration, or it's civil rights, or it's justice, but it's everything. It's everything. And one of the unique threats about Donald Trump is it isn't even like a right-wing or conservative thing so much as an attack on America, attack on these institutions, and then at the heart of it, an attack on America being something for all Americans. So that's why I'm back.
I appreciate this Jamaica connection and think it's very unfair that I'm like legally prohibited from bringing another Russian into the studio. So
But they're
will
listening.
work on that. But they're listening all the time. Yeah, it's good to know.
They're listening.
John, I think the story of Daily Action is a story about the power and impact of calling your member of Congress. Talk about some of the successes Daily Action has had, some of the tangible results from people picking up the phone and registering their views, their complaints with the people who are tasked with representing them.
Sure. And so we've done a handful of actions, sometimes to Congress or to the states. One action that comes to mind as a sort of quick, decisive win. There was news that ExxonMobil was petitioning the State Department, Treasury Department, to get a waiver from Russia sanctions. And basically they wanted permission to violate the sanctions, go to Russia, drill for oil, get paid. And that news broke. The very next day, our action was to the House Foreign Affairs Committee to say, you have oversight. You cannot let the administration do this. You've got to put a stop to this immediately. The very next day, the news came out from the administration saying, no waiver for ExxonMobil, no waiver for anybody. And so I think for Daily Action, it was the first time that we jumped on a unique issue and seen an immediate impact. And it was absolutely the right gear in the machine to strike. And one of the things that's amazing to me is everybody in D.C. gets it. Everybody in D.C. I mean, that's why they turn off the phones. That's why they try not to have town halls, because they know that for every elected politician, where it's for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, if they hear from their constituents, they're not going to go in opposition to like the popular will. They're not going to go in opposition to what they're hearing from the constituents if they hear it loud enough and if they hear it from enough of their constituents. And that's why they turn off their phones. It's always a surprise. And I see it in the Facebook comments. People are like, oh, wow, this actually works. And it's like, yeah, we're not wasting your time. We're not wasting our time. It actually works. Like, this is actually a call. We know when we call to ask them to co-sponsor. We know when we call. Sometimes our calls are telling people, make a statement, speak up. And we see when they do and they don't.
John Burton is the political director of Daily Action. Now, tell us again how you sign up for Daily Action.
Yes, you sign up for Daily Action by texting the word daily, DAILY. That's mainly for me to make sure I don't misspell it, to the number for action, which is 228466. And we're also on Facebook at Your Daily Action, easy to find. And that's great because we dig a little deeper into the issues, and that's also a place where you can see the reactions that people are getting in different offices, because the comments will come in. So-and-so's turned off their phones, or so-and-so says, yes, they're now on board. They're putting on a statement, particularly around healthcare. It was a lot of fun to see how the votes were trending and who was being quiet and who was still taking calls and who wasn't.
John,
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you both.
As a follow-up to our bonus episode last week with Christy Goldfuss, you may recall we discussed Trump's decision to withdraw the United States from a 195-nation agreement on reducing our carbon footprint on this planet. But don't be alarmed, because the resistance has a response for you. Go ahead and check out a new campaign, I'm Still In. You can go to imstillin.org or follow the hashtag I'mStillInCampaign to find out what are specific steps you can take as an individual to reduce your climate footprint. How can you encourage local leaders, elected officials, businesses to get involved in this campaign to save the only planet we've ever known.
Thinking Cap is produced by Sally Tucker. Music by Kyle Epstein and Jacob Buchanan. Graphics by Matt Ingram. For more, find us at Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and at AmericanProgress.org, or wherever you want.